Welcome to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly produced by Ravens Recruitment, the experts in pharmacy career and locum services for over 30 years. Every episode is your gateway to new opportunities in the pharmacy profession. From expert advice to inspiring success stories, we're here to spark ideas, guide your career, and help you achieve your goals. Stay tuned. The next step in your pharmacy journey starts here.
Welcome to another episode of Your Pharmacy Career Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Lee Patterson, and in today's episode, I will be chatting to Ivan, who has a decades-long career in pharmacy, from building up underperforming pharmacies and surviving personal and financial setbacks, to leading national board positions and now mentoring the next generation of pharmacy owners through his consulting and writing. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Ivan, I always ask everyone what's drew them to pharmacy early in your career. You started your pharmacy career back in 1976, and I'm sure that entering the pharmacy industry back then looked very different to what it does now. Or maybe it doesn't. I'd love to hear what drew you.
Very, 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 very different. Very different. It was actually 76 was the year that I qualified, but I did my year 12, or it was called something else back then. But when I finished that, I entered pharmacy in 1973. And I suppose what made me make that decision to go into pharmacy was that I wanted to be in the medical field, but I also enjoyed business. My parents ran some greengrocery shops, and I worked in them ever since I can remember as a kid, and it's in school holidays and that sort of Christmas and whatever. And I really enjoyed that sort of retail environment, interacting with the customers and watching how my parents built relationships with their customers. Even though it's a fruit shop, it was very typical of community retail, and I really loved that. And I wanted something that would combine retail with the medical side, and pharmacy was the obvious choice.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned that it looked very different to what it does now. I guess what are some of the key things that stand out to you now as what was different back then to what it is now?
Well, I think the most obvious is the pricing and the discounting and that sort of thing. Back in those days, everyone sold medicine for the same price. It was dictated by the government, and there was no pricing competition, particularly on prescriptions. The front of shop was different, but prescriptions were the same price everywhere you went. So you really stood out by the relationship that you built with your customers, and that was everything. It wasn't about being cheaper or that sort of thing. It was really about the care that you gave your customers and the relationship that you built with your customers, and that was the most important thing back in those days. And I still think that applies today. And unfortunately, I think because of the influx of discounting and major discount brands, I think that's being lost. And I've tried to maintain that right through my career. And fortunately, I think it's been the right strategy, at least for me.
I completely agree. And when you mentioned the relationships being really important, I can definitely see that that's now a key differentiator in a lot of pharmacies now, where if they don't want to compete on price, they want to focus on services and building that loyalty with their patients.
100%. 100%. It's about professionalism, professional services, relationships, trust and care. That's what it's all about. I really believe, and I've always said this my whole career, that when you qualify as a pharmacist, your knowledge and the person next to you, the pharmacist next to you, your knowledge is pretty much the same. What really stands out is your personality and your care and how you build those relationships. I don't think really to a great degree one pharmacist's knowledge varies a lot to another pharmacist. And I think, the relationship and care is really what stands out as the differentiator. And the professionalism. A lot of the discounters, to me, look very unprofessional to what I'm used to. few of them look just like a JB Hi-Fi store when you walk in, and the only difference is they're not selling music, they're selling medication and over-the-counter medication and that sort of thing. But the feel to me isn't one of professionalism.
I think that's interesting as to what does professionalism actually look like and what does it mean? And I think as like I've been in the pharmacy industry, it's been in it now for only 10 years. Got a little way to go to catch up to you, Ivan, but I've seen so much change already just in that 10 years. And I think some pharmacy models, they do give the customer what they want, that fast service or a really big range of products, and especially those that are quite price sensitive. But I think if you, especially running your own business or you want to buy your own pharmacy, you really need to decide, okay, are you going to play in that space as competing on price, or are you going to differentiate yourself? And your experience, you've ran many businesses, both pharmacies and others throughout your career. I'm assuming that that's what you did to differentiate yourselves with your pharmacies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you go down the track of discounting, it's a road to ruin. Unless you are the major player, you won't compete. You can't compete because of just volumes. And if you're a small independent and have a big sign up saying, we match everyone's prices, it's a road to ruin. It's, you should be advertising your professional services. I'm not saying not to compete with pricing, but don't expect to be the same price or cheaper. I think people expect you to be in the ballpark. You don't have to be the cheapest. You have to be in the ballpark. You can't be outrageously more expensive. But what gets you over the line is the one-on-one, the relationship. And I know I've said it and I'm going to probably say it time and time again, but it's everything. It's absolutely everything. I think you can compete on price, but also you need to maintain the professionalism. You need to maintain the professional look. I think you need your customers/patients to come into your pharmacy and know that they're in a medical environment, not in a discount with placards everywhere saying, the price of this and the price of that and whatever. I think honestly, you can't compete at that level given the current market. You won't win. You won't win, and you'll end up matching prices and getting a rude awakening when your accountant tells you, that you're making a loss and you've got to get out or change what you're doing.
I think what you're saying is very important, especially as we're about to go through some major change in pharmacy with the expanded scope of practice and full scope. And I'm already seeing like some large groups, like for example, Terry White now focusing a lot more on looking professional, having lots of clinical rooms, looking more medical. So I'm definitely seeing that in the industry now as well.
Yep, I think that's the way to go. And I think the likes of Terry White, I've got a soft spot for Terry White because they're Chemmart, but I think they're going in the right direction. And I think the more professional we become, or not become, but the more professional we look, the less product at a price focused we are, the better. And the more service based we are, the better. And, I welcome the initiative of pharmacists prescribing for various conditions. I think that's fantastic. It's one of the best things I've seen in a long time.
Well, that's very exciting. And I think that will mean a lot to our listeners, especially those that are maybe just finishing their degree or in their internships. Yeah, this is really going to make a huge difference ultimately to the everyday people of Australia and their health.
Yeah, I think it's a big step forward for pharmacists and pharmacies, a big step forward. I don't know if the big box models have got the infrastructure to be able to do that sort of thing. And that's where I think a lot of the non-discounters, the smaller chains and independents can really make an impact.
You mentioned you had a soft spot for Terry White Chemmart, and I believe that's because you were on the Chemmart board during your career.
And then it became Chemmart, and now it's Chemmart Terry White's. But so I was fortunate enough to be on the board
Oh, wow, okay.
of Chemmart in those days, and it was really very, very exciting. I think we grew the brand nicely in the day. And my responsibility on the board was product selection for catalogues and pricing of those products in catalogues. I think it was much more prominent back in the late 90s than it is now. I mean, it was more not acceptable, but it was something that people were very interested in because there wasn't the major discounters around then. So every house was getting a drop of a catalogue and keen to see how much they could buy things for and what was on special and that sort of thing. Now it's very much flooded by one or two big brands. But in those days, people used to look forward to the specials, and my responsibility on the board was choosing those products, liaising with the suppliers to get the best prices possible, and then determining what price we were going to sell it for in the catalogue.
Actually sounds like a lot of pressure actually to be able to make these decisions for a whole brand.
Yeah. Well, it sort of didn't feel like it at the time. I didn't feel like it was really just getting suppliers on board and finding products that public wanted and needed, everyday products.
Yeah. And so for people that don't maybe understand what a board does or what they do, you've spoken about the responsibilities that you had, but in order to get to that position, what did you have to do in your career to be able to, I guess, step up to be on that board? I'm assuming obviously owning the pharmacies within the brand.
Yes, I did that. And also, I think I was nominated from memory. I was nominated by a few pharmacists that were under the banner. And then the board at the time voted me in, and I was actually the youngest on the board at the time. And that sort of was the reason why I got on TV. That was one of the reasons, because I was asked, the advertising company came in from South Australia that we employed, and they said, we want to do a monthly spot on Channel 9 breakfast show, and we want one of you guys to do it. All of a sudden, my heart started beating, and I looked around and I saw all the other board members just looking at me. And I said, no, 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 no way. And they all said, Ivan, you'll be the best one for this job. So I really couldn't say no, because I wanted to please everyone on the board. So I took up that challenge and was very, very nervous about it initially, but it ended up being a lot of fun.
Yeah, that actually is quite innovative for that as well, because I mean, now Chemist Warehouse has spots on TV. They have their own show, but I guess, yeah, were you one of the first pharmacists really to be in TV in that sort of space?
We had a good advertising company, and I was on once a month, and it coincided with the health weeks, whether it be diabetes week or blood pressure week or those sorts of things. So it would correspond with the week that it was. So I talk a little bit about those conditions and what people could do. Yeah. So I suppose I didn't think about it like that, but it was one of the first sort of regular spots on TV, I think, with a pharmacist or pharmacy group.
Yeah, that would have been really quite fun, I guess, once you got into the groove of it and knew what they were expecting. And
yeah, after the night before the first interview and drinking, I don't remember how many bottles of Rescue Remedy because I was so nervous. But after the first couple, it was fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Speaking of, other things that you've enjoyed throughout your career, you've turned a lot of, I guess, underperforming pharmacies into quite successful pharmacies. How do you do that? And I'm sure we can't answer that question and give it the justice in the short period of time that we have on this podcast. But is there anything that stands out to you which you can share with our listeners, that maybe a couple of tips that they can pull out and try? So maybe there's a pharmacy and they've got a competitor that's just opened up down the road, or they've just purchased a pharmacy that's really great value for them to be able to buy in, but maybe it's performing quite poorly. Do you have any advice for pharmacies in that position built upon your experience?
I think when I bought pharmacies, I always looked at, obviously, pharmacies that were underperforming and had potential. I didn't think there was any point buying a pharmacy that was maxed out and you couldn't do anything with. You just continued the way it was. And that's okay for some people. But for me, what I enjoyed was the challenge of creating something out of yeah, nothing in inverted commas. And people would ask me that question, and I'd often say, first thing I'd do is change all the light globes and turn on the lights. Because a lot of the pharmacies that were run down were dark and dingy, and the owners had generally been in them for a long time, and they had developed store blindness. They couldn't see how bad it was because they were so used to it. And I say it as a joke, but it's true that, light globes would be gone and lights were out, and and joking, I say I just turned the lights on, and that made a huge difference. But I think going in and knowing what the most important thing is in building any business, whether it's pharmacy or not, is coming back to building relationships. That's really, I think that's the essence of any business, building relationships based on trust and care, honest care, not just superficial care to get the sale. And I think they're the main things. The housekeeping sort of issues were cleaning the place up, decluttering the pharmacies. So many pharmacies were cluttered and bins everywhere on the floor, specials bins on the floor, and posters up everywhere, and posters on the window that had been there years, and dead flies behind them, and that sort of thing.
I'm laughing, but because I guess some things don't change, because there's definitely some pharmacies still around that look like that.
Yeah, yeah. And they're the ones that I just wish I could help, but often they don't want help. But it's sort of really, to me, and I think to a lot of people, it just stands out the sort of things that you can do. But I think the most important is relationships. And I didn't realize that until I was probably further down in my career and had a few issues, health issues and financial issues. And I just realized that if you focus on the relationship, the income will come, the money will come. But if you focus on the money and the income, you lose sight, and it's not sustainable. The income will come if you build those relationships and those trust of your customers.
I think I listen to a lot of business podcasts and YouTube clips of successful entrepreneurs, and they do say all the same thing. So I think you're onto something there, Ivan. But I guess when you're in that situation where I guess you need money to survive, it can be hard to see that. So maybe from your experience, yeah, how do you keep yourself going when you're in that situation?
Look, obviously, it's the income is very important, and you've got to look at ways of differentiating yourself. And again, coming back to the discount models, if you want to compete, it's going to be very difficult to earn a good income. I think pharmacists are underpaid, terribly underpaid, and I think pharmacy shop assistants are terribly underpaid. So I think to go down that discount model, you don't have that leeway in the money that you make because you're trying to compete with the big brands that have huge buying power, and you find that often you'd be better off being an employee than an owner if you try to do that. But if you establish professional services and that you do a lot of these services available, the big discounters can't do that. Their model doesn't allow for it. And that's I think how you can start to earn a really good income stream if you focus on those professional services. And obviously other things like, buying well is important. I think being very careful on, what you sell for is very important. I think you have to have very strict KPIs that you keep to and don't wander away from, whether it's labor costs, whether it's margins, all of that's overheads, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, it is sometimes easy to veer away from those, but I think sometimes you do have to make decisions and be strict on what those are and make sure you follow it. Now, Ivan, you briefly mentioned that you did experience some financial hardship outside of pharmacy. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that story and how you, I guess, jumped back and managed to get your mindset into a better place?
I wouldn't say I jumped back. I crawled out of a hole to get back.
Crawled out of the hole.
So what happened was, at the time, I owned a very prominent pharmacy in Melbourne, and it was really like a very respected pharmacy. A lot of pharmacists would come and check out how we were doing things, and so that was extremely successful. And at the same time, I was on the board of Chemmart, and at the same time, I was doing the Channel 9 morning show, and I think my head got a bit too big, and I thought that I could do anything. I was on top of it to follow my passion, which was food, and I always wanted to have some sort of food business, retail food business. So I decided I can do anything, and I'm going to do it. Sold my pharmacy and spent a year developing a food concept, fast food concept, a year with no income, with private school fees to pay. So I spent a year developing this concept and opened it up and made a shopping centre, and it went really, really well. Until the shopping centre decided to close down the car park for renovations, and everything just went down. And I lost everything, basically. I lost my house, my dream house that we'd just finished building. I had a nice car, I had to sell that. And when I look back, I say I lost everything that really was worth nothing. So it was a really difficult time. I had a nervous breakdown, and I had to somehow get back on my feet. I had 2 kids going through private school, and I didn't have a choice. I just had to come back somehow. So yeah, I started with the help of medication. I started working from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at one pharmacy, about 45-minute drive from home. And then that was till 4. And then I drove across to the other side of town and worked at another pharmacy from 5 to midnight, and did that for 5 days a week for over a year. So that was an interesting time, a difficult time, but I managed to get up enough money for a deposit on another pharmacy, got back on my feet, and turned the pharmacy around very quickly, and bought another pharmacy which turned around quite quickly. And here I am 25 years later, semi-retired, never thinking that I'd ever own a house again, never thinking that I'd have a holiday again. So I'm lucky that I got myself out of it.
Do you think the thing that kept you going was, you mentioned because you had to, right? Like you had a family and you just had to. The fact that you're also open that you did get support, whether that meant medication, and I'm sure your wife was probably also had to be a big support for you as well at the time if you were working so much with the family.
Yeah, well, as I said, I lost everything that was worth nothing, and you realise that the most important thing is your family. And, my family supported me, helped me get through it, trusted that I could get through it. And I was very blessed that I had wife and children that really believed in me and believed that I could get back on my feet.
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's just in life in general, whenever you have, whether you call it a setback or something doesn't go as planned, I think if the people around you can be supportive and you surround yourself with people that hopefully you've made the right choice with who your family is, and you certainly did, can make a big difference.
But I think also I always call it my Control-Alt-Delete moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a reset, and it was a reset to my values. And I think it helped me in the pharmacy because I realized how important relationships are, whether it's your family or whether it's your friends or whether it's your customers and patients. And the relationship is so important. And I think the fact that I was focusing on that so much, because I was blessed to have good relationships, that helped me build the businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess fast forward your career journey to now, after, I guess that massive career of owning pharmacies, owning fast food retail, food shop, and doing all these different things. What are you doing now? Are you still in the pharmacy industry?
Well, yeah, I recently sold 2 pharmacies that I had left, and I'm now working in one of those pharmacies as an employee a couple of days a week because I just love being there and I love the customers and I think most of them loved me. So I'm doing that. And but my passion at the moment is trying to consult and help young pharmacists navigate their way through their careers and become successful, help young pharmacists that are looking at buying a pharmacy, because I've done many and fortunately I've been successful, at least in pharmacy. I think that a lot of young people buying into pharmacies need some independent advice because the brokers will come up with a pharmacy for you to have a look at, to potentially buy, but the very nature of the broker is to have the best interests of his client, to sell. They sell the business for the client, and it's in their interest to sell the business for the client. So it's a little bit of a bias towards the vendor than the purchaser. And then a lot of young pharmacists will go to their accountants and try to get them to assess the viability of a potential business. I think with respect to accountants, they're fantastic at crunching numbers and they can tell you that, your overheads need to reduce or your margins need to increase, et cetera, but they can't give you that gut feeling that an experienced pharmacist can give you. And an accountant isn't trained to come out on site and look at the potential of a pharmacy. They look at the current figures, but they don't know what the potential is. They don't know what your ability is. And I just find that there's a need, for want of a better term, a buyer's advocate to come in and say, look, the numbers need to be tweaked and improved. There's potential in doing that. There's potential with just making the business look better, from a customer's perspective, and then the pitfalls of a major discounter being nearby or the potential of a major discounter coming into your strip or your catchment area and what impact that would have on you. A lot of potential pitfalls. And I've seen it many times, with young people that have needed to borrow the money, or whether it's from banks or from family or whatever, and then get into all sorts of strife. And for me, at this stage in my life and career, it's not about making money doing this. It's not important to me. It's about guiding and helping and forwarding my experience that I've had. Because when I sold my businesses because of health issues, and then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought that all the knowledge that I've gained over 50 years is just going to be wasted. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to go into the ether. And I thought, such a waste of 50 years of knowledge and experience. And I wanted to just pass that on somehow.
I think it's a great idea. And you're right. I actually never really thought of it. But when you said there's not really anyone independent for the buyer, there really isn't. And I know I've gone through, yes.
And I think also because of the cost of entering into the market, a lot of younger people and that don't have the funds will go in with friends. Will go in with friends to buy a business, and that's also fraught with problems. I mean, it might seem great at the time, but when you're friends and then business comes into it, things change. You see sides of people that you never knew. When money's at stake, when loans are at stake and livelihoods are at stake, people change. So that's also fraught with problems. You've got to be very, very careful.
Brilliant. Well, what we'll do, Ivan, is I'll pop your LinkedIn profile and email into the show notes so that people are listening and they want to reach out to you, they can.
Well, my age group is not very good on social media, although I think I'm technically quite capable, but I've always shied away from social media. But I've been told that I should be on LinkedIn, which I now am. And I put posts on LinkedIn, which I think are pretty good, and I get quite a few likes. But, the best way to contact me is either through LinkedIn or directly by my email, which is Ivan Grauer, IvanGrauer @gmail.com. Thank you. And I'm happy to chat on the phone. No obligation, no cost or whatever. Just chat if people want just a quick chat about what they're doing and what I can do for them. And yeah, no obligation whatsoever, no cost whatsoever.
That's great. I think that's, really kind of you. And I think a lot of people would actually need that, I think. Now, Ivan, before we wrap up our conversation today, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners that perhaps we haven't had a chance to touch on so far?
I think pharmacy is a great profession. I think there's a lot of satisfaction in pharmacy. There's a lot of respect for pharmacists. Pharmacies have always been a local community go-to place for first line of healthcare. And I think pharmacies are still one of the last bastions of community where you can just go and speak to a pharmacist, ask them advice, and be told whether they need to go and get further advice from a medico. It's a shame that I think a lot of it's being lost, the local butcher shop, the local, even, post offices are closing, banks are closing, everything's closing. And I think pharmacy is still there as a cornerstone of the community. And that's very satisfying, I think. I think also that, pharmacists see families, growing up, parents bringing their babies in to, their babies becoming teenagers and they see the whole cycle and are part of it. And when I speak to people, a lot of them have very fond memories of when they were little. They used to come in and they used to, in the old days, get a jelly bean or whatever. And they remember that, their parents used to bring them in and there was always a jar of jelly beans or the pharmacist helped them with a wart that they had or something. It's funny the things that people remember, but always, I think mostly fondly. They remember things fondly about their local pharmacist. Thank you.
I think that's a great way to end the discussion. And I completely agree. And especially in rural areas, they certainly are. But I live in Sydney now and I've been in Sydney for 5 years. And I'm seeing a bit of a transition that people do want to be part of their local area, like where they live. And pharmacy is definitely still a place for that.
Yeah, I think it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ivan, for joining us on the show today. I really valued our discussion, and I've certainly learned some things from you, which I will take into my own business as well. So I think a lot of it applies even if you don't have a pharmacy, but all businesses. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to Your Pharmacy Career Podcast, proudly sponsored by the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia. The PSA is committed to empowering pharmacists through advocacy, innovation, and industry-leading professional development. To become a member or learn more about how the PSA can support your career, visit www.psa.org.au. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast with your colleagues, and join us next time as we continue to explore your pharmacy career journey.